In 2022, a study from Harvard University tracked more than 18,000 adults over 5 years and found that people who drank one specific natural beverage every single day had up to 32% lower risk of arterial blockage compared to those who did not. That drink is not a prescription medication, not an expensive juice from some organic store, and certainly not something your doctor is bringing up at your annual checkup. It is affordable, it tastes good, and chances are you may have already had it sitting in your kitchen cabinet without realizing you are missing out on one of the most powerful medical tools available to you. Let me tell you the story of Harold, 67 years old, living in Ohio. One March morning, while Harold was brewing his coffee, he suddenly felt a crushing pressure in his chest. His left arm went completely numb, and he collapsed onto the kitchen floor before he could even understand what was happening. The final diagnosis was 78% blockage of his coronary arteries. But Harold's story does not end there. After surgery, his cardiologist introduced a few small changes to his daily habits, and one of them was drinking 1 cup of pure cacao every single morning. 6 months later, Harold's vascular ultrasound showed significant improvement. His blood pressure was down, his arterial stiffness had decreased, and he said he felt like he had gotten 10 years of his life back. So what exactly inside cacao made that possible? And how do you need to drink it to get the maximum benefit? That is exactly what we are going to cover in today's video. Part 1, the key factors that affect your arteries. Before we talk about cacao, we need to understand why your arteries are the one thing you should be paying more attention to than almost any other organ once you reach 60. Inside your arteries, there is an inner layer of cells called the vascular endothelium, and this layer of cells is incredibly intelligent. It produces a substance called nitric oxide, and nitric oxide is what keeps your arterial walls relaxed and flexible, allows blood to flow freely, and prevents plaque from forming and sticking. When this cell lining becomes damaged or starts functioning poorly, nitric oxide production drops, and that is when things start going downhill. And here is the most concerning part. After the age of 50, your body's natural ability to produce nitric oxide declines significantly every single year. That means even if you eat well and exercise regularly, your vascular endothelium is gradually losing its protective power in the most literal sense of the word aging. On top of nitric oxide, there are 3 other key factors that doctors talk about when it comes to arterial health. The first is LDL cholesterol, the bad kind, because this is the primary raw material that plaque uses to build up that thick layer of buildup inside your artery walls. The second is chronic inflammation in the body, because inflammation does not just cause aches and pains, it directly damages the arterial wall itself, making it far more vulnerable. And the third is arterial stiffness, because when your arteries become rigid and lose their elasticity, your heart has to work much harder to push blood through them, and that leads to high blood pressure in a vicious cycle that many of my patients have been stuck in for years without even realizing it. So what is there that can address all 4 of those vulnerabilities at the same time, naturally and without a prescription? That is exactly why we are here today. Part 2, cacao, the miracle drink that helps your arteries flow better. First, let us clear something up because a lot of people get this wrong. Cacao and chocolate are not the same thing. Commercial chocolate, especially the milk chocolate and the super sweet varieties filling every grocery store shelf, typically contains very little active flavanols because it has gone through heavy processing, had sugar added, had dairy added, and had all sorts of other ingredients mixed in. Pure cacao, specifically unsweetened and minimally processed cacao powder, is the form that all the scientific research is actually referring to. Think of it this way. Raw cacao is like a fresh tomato picked straight from your garden, and sweetened chocolate is like canned tomato sauce loaded with salt and sugar. Same origin, completely different nutritional value. Pure cacao is one of the richest plant-based sources of flavanols on the planet, and flavanols are the active compounds responsible for most of the health benefits we are going to discuss. Beyond flavanols, cacao also contains magnesium, a mineral that statistically more than 50% of Americans over 60 are deficient in without even knowing it, and that is honestly a pretty sad statistic. Magnesium helps relax the smooth muscle tissue in your artery walls, is involved in over 300 biochemical reactions throughout your body, and supports healthy heart rhythm regulation. Cacao also contains theobromine, a mild, natural compound that helps dilate blood vessels and improve circulation without triggering the strong nervous system stimulation that caffeine does. And this is the finding that truly grabbed my attention after many years of practice, which is a study from the National Cardiovascular Institute at Northwestern University in 2019 that tracked more than 21,000 adults and showed that the group who regularly consumed flavonols from cacao on a daily basis had a 27% lower rate of cardiovascular mortality compared to the group that did not. 27% is not a small number. That is nearly 1/3 of all potentially preventable deaths that could be reduced by one simple morning habit. And the most remarkable thing is that not a single participant in that study had to overhaul their entire diet or start a high-intensity exercise program. They simply added 1 cup of cacao to their day. Part 3, how cacao actually works on your arteries. All right, now let us go deeper into the mechanism. But do not worry, because I am going to explain this in the simplest way possible, not the way a medical textbook would. The first and most important mechanism is that flavonols in cacao activate an enzyme inside vascular endothelial cells called eNOS, which stands for endothelial nitric oxide synthase, and this enzyme is essentially the nitric oxide production machine I mentioned earlier. When flavonols enter your body, they help the vascular endothelium produce more nitric oxide, and the direct result is that artery walls relax and widen, blood flows more easily, and blood pressure tends to come down. If you are on blood pressure medication and wondering why it sometimes does not fully work, part of the reason is that your endothelium is no longer producing enough nitric oxide on its own, and cacao can help fill that gap in a way that medication simply cannot replicate. The second mechanism is the antioxidant effect. The flavonols in cacao, especially epicatechin, are extraordinarily powerful antioxidants. Think of oxidation in the body like metal rusting. That is what happens when unstable molecules called free radicals attack and damage your cells, including the cells that line your artery walls. When the artery wall is damaged by oxidation, it becomes more prone to inflammation, and when it becomes inflamed, LDL cholesterol sticks to it more easily, and that is how plaque builds up thicker and thicker over time. Cacao flavonols will travel throughout your bloodstream, neutralizing free radicals before they have a chance to cause that kind of damage. The third mechanism involves platelets and the blood clotting process. A study from Johns Hopkins Medical Center in 2006 found that the flavonols in cacao have a platelet-inhibiting effect similar to low-dose aspirin, but gentler and without the gastrointestinal side effects that aspirin so commonly causes. Platelets are tiny blood cells responsible for clotting, and when they become overactive, they tend to clump together inside a narrowed artery and form a blood clot, and that clot is exactly what triggers a heart attack or a stroke in an instant. By helping platelets calm down just a little bit, cacao reduces that risk without making you bleed more easily the way high-dose aspirin can. Part 4. How to use cacao the right way to support your arteries. Now we are getting to the most important part, which is how to actually receive the benefits of cacao rather than just sipping a cup of sweet chocolate and telling yourself you are taking care of your heart. The first non-negotiable factor is the type of cacao you choose. You need pure, unsweetened cacao powder that has not been Dutch processed, because the Dutch process method significantly reduces the flavanol content. Look for products that clearly say raw cacao powder or minimally processed unsweetened cocoa powder on the label. Stay away from any pre-mixed powder or any prepared cacao product that has added sugar and dairy, because they deliver the calories without delivering the flavonols. On dosage, most clinical studies use approximately 1 to 2 tablespoons, which is roughly 1 to 1.5 ounces of cacao powder per day, to reach the flavanol threshold that benefits the vascular system. That is roughly equivalent to between 200 and 400 milligrams of flavanols, depending on the specific product. You do not need more than that, because more is not better in this case. And additionally, cacao does contain a small amount of caffeine and theobromine, so drinking too much in the evening can affect your sleep quality. On preparation, you can dissolve the cacao powder in about 8 ounces of warm water. Do not make it too hot, because temperatures that are too high can break down some of the flavanols. If you want it easier to drink, adding a splash of unsweetened almond milk or oat milk is perfectly fine. One small tip I share with my patients regularly is to add just a tiny pinch of sea salt. It sounds odd, but salt balances out the bitterness and rounds out the cacao flavor beautifully without needing to add any sugar at all. And if you want to amplify the nitric oxide effect even further, consider stirring in 1 teaspoon of beetroot powder, because beets are one of the richest natural sources of nitrates available, and when you combine them with cacao flavanols, the vasodilation effect can increase quite significantly. On timing, morning is the most ideal moment to drink your cacao. The reason is that in the early morning hours, blood pressure naturally spikes as you wake up, and this is also the time when the highest number of heart attacks and strokes tend to occur during the day. Starting your morning with cacao flavanols helps prime your vascular endothelium early and gives it protection during those critical first hours. If you have a sensitive stomach, take it with breakfast rather than on a completely empty stomach. And if you are currently taking blood thinners like warfarin or Coumadin, please check with your doctor first, because cacao's mild platelet effect can interact with those medications. We have covered a lot of important ground today. If this video brought value to you, please share it with the people you love, especially anyone over 55 who has concerns about their heart health, so they can learn about the silent risk of arterial blockage and this simple way to start protecting themselves. Your like on this video also helps YouTube recommend it to more older adults who need this information right now and do not even know where to look for it. And if you have not subscribed to the channel yet, go ahead and hit that button right down below so we can meet again for the next piece of health advice, because I have so much more to share with you about how to live well and live joyfully in the most beautiful decades of your life.